Hey folks, Cool18 here, and welcome to another episode of Let's Play Kerbal Space Program. This is basically a repeat of the last one, where we are sending a probe to land on the moon. But unlike the last time, we have extra solar panels because we ended up exactly like this last time, where solar panels on the top were facing away from the sun, and we just happened to be out of power over here. But now we've got some extra solar panels on the side, so that we don't have to worry about angling things. It would have been fine if I'd remembered to angle. But anyway, we are approaching the node. This is the same design as last time, except a couple extra solar panels to make it a little bit more forgiving. Stop. And basically here, I set up the maneuver just to help us eyeball things, but we are just going to do a retrograde burn here and get ourselves in orbit of the moon. There we go. This is our actual landing stage. I'd like to extend our landing gear out. And yeah, basically, I'm not going to follow the maneuver. Oh, I probably want to wait a little bit longer to finish this. Just end up with a somewhat rounder final orbit. A little closer. There you go. I think our thrust weight ratio with this engine is a little bit better than before. So I'm just going to try to bring this down. There we go. 18. 23. That's going to be fine. Okay, so what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and hibernate our probodividing core, which will dramatically cut back on the power usage. It still goes, but it's like at a fraction. We need to make sure that we land with sunshine, A, because we want solar power as we go down, B, it's a lot easier to land when you can see your shadow, but also with line of sight towards Kerbin, because as far as I can tell, actually, these antennae that we use, that's interesting. We have limited probe control right now, which means, yeah, I can't steer, I can't turn, I can't thrust. It says we have a direct connection to the space center. Oh, it's limited because of the hibernation. But as far as I can tell with this, we actually can't use these other satellites as part of our control network. And I think it's because our current antennas, the ones we've got loaded on both these satellites, are omnidirectional, so I don't think they allow you to bounce signal. I think you need one of the directed ones to actually build the bouncing signal network. I don't know if we only need it on ourselves, only on the other one, on both, I'm not sure. All right, at this point, we are facing the KSC, and we've got sun, but I think I'm going to wait a little bit longer, I guess, to the other side of this big crater here. Because here's the thing, we had a connection to the KSC while we were high up, but you can tell, if we were to land right here, we would probably not have it. And because the moon is tidally locked, i.e. it orbits at the same time as it rotates, there's the dark side of the moon, or more accurately, the far side of the moon. The far side of the moon isn't always dark, but it always faces away from Kerbin. Therefore, we would never actually have a connection. But this looks to be pretty safe. I don't know, what the ground looks like, but luckily, one of the nice things with this probe being so light, it's going to be a lot more forgiving. So we can go ahead and dehibernate. There we go. And I'm going to rotate retrograde. And we're going to burn here. Now, as I do this burn, my retrograde might move a little bit. Well, I guess I'll still be at the top of the arc, so retrograde will always be on the horizon. But what I'm trying to do here is eliminate as much horizontal speed as possible, which is not necessarily the most efficient way. You can see it start to move out a little bit here. Not necessarily the most efficient way of doing it, but there you go. That's pretty good. And our landing spot's going to be somewhere over there, which looks pretty good. So we still have some horizontal speed, but not much of it. So now we're going to start to descend. And because we're descending, our retrograde marker is going to move. But at some point, we're still going to have to kill more of the horizontal speed. Now, because I don't have any mods, because this is still a pre-release version and mods haven't been updated, I don't have a nice handy breakdown of my vertical speed versus my horizontal speed. There's a little meter here to eyeball your vertical speed. And more importantly, in surface mode is what we're more curious about. A little hard to read this because it's logarithmic. The other thing we don't have a handy readout for is our altitude above the ground. This is altitude above the so-called sea level. Obviously, there's no seas on the moon, but that's what this represents. And wherever we land, we're going to have some elevation. So we might land when this says 100, it might land when it says 1,000. We don't quite know based on what's below us. Although, if I open up the KerbNet access, looks like the altitude of the ground right here is 3.7 meters, or 3.7 kilometers. So So we should land when this says 3,700. That's actually very interesting information. It does help that we're landing on the sunny side, so that's good. So what I'm going to try to do is as our speed goes up here, when I hit about 10K, I'm going to try to keep our speed below 100 meters per second. The single most fuel-efficient way to land is to do a so-called suicide burn, which is the exact perfect time when you turn the engine to max. You don't do any burns until the last possible minute. You turn your engine to max, and it just so happens that your thrust works out that the second that you touch the ground is the second that your speed happens to hit 0. And that's the most efficient way to do it. But I can't really eyeball that, so that ain't going to happen. So you can see the retrograde markers almost moved to the top of that nav ball over here, which is very much as expected. Actually, did it drift over the other way? But mostly, well, I guess I'll do this to start off with, but I still will have to do a little bit of horizontal burn. And as the nav ball drifts over, what I will do is I will try to push the retrograde marker back to the middle. Let me go a little bit of that. There you go. See, it has drifted over this way. So we'll try to do the burn from, somewhere over here next. Okay, so we're about 6,000 kilometers above the surface now, because apparently our altitude here is 3.7. Let's take another look at CurbNet. Yeah, 3.7 from the ground. So we're going to be landing on one of these upper ridges. I don't know what the actual biome is called. I might have said it on the display, but I don't think so. Oh, we can see our shadow now. Excellent. Brilliant. Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. We still have a direct connection to the Space Center. Really good. And our thrust-to-weight ratio is really good. We can arrest our motion extraordinarily quickly here, which is great stuff. Great stuff. If you had a better probe core and you could lock it to retrograde, that would be pretty handy for this, although you want to turn that off as you get lower, because it's very easy to accidentally sort of thrust a little bit too much and start moving upwards slightly, which will then cause your retrograde locked ship to decide to flip the other direction, because retrograde will obviously be pointing differently. Just going to try to slow burn over here. And just pushing the retrograde marker a little bit more towards the middle is the idea. And when you're going at low vertical speeds, then, whoa! I'm actually going up here. My finger slipped. When you're going at low vertical speeds, you will actually be able to quite clearly see what your horizontal, there it is, what your horizontal movement is like, because you're going to have no vertical component, so all your retrograde would be how to cancel your horizontal speed. So now I've got to assume our horizontal speed is basically nothing. The other thing to do if you've got fuel to burn is you could preemptively drop your vertical speed to 0, and then any motion you have here in surface represents your total horizontal speed. Alright, so we are definitely closing in here. See our shadow, so we know we've got some distance. I've got one little puff power here just to try to keep this a little slow, but really I don't need to slow down quite that far right now, especially again, since our thrust weight is really good. I'm going to try to keep us pinned to the top of the nav ball. Luckily, we are very, very, very light. So even if we hit this with some amount of speed... Oh, where the hell? My shadow disappeared. Unpleasant. Even if we hit this with... there it is. I think the shadow calculation system just changed from the upper one, which is probably more of a point shadow, to the realistic one. So even if we hit with some amount of speed, either vertically or horizontally, that represents very little actual sort of momentum or kinetic energy. So in practice, we should still halt pretty well. Again, I'm doing very little thrust. We are definitely going sideways. In fact, it looks like we're probably going sideways maybe at a couple meters per second, or at least 1 meter per second. So I'm going to try to, there we go, thrust a little sideways instead. And now I'm back up to thrusting just vertically, but overdoing it. I should actually probably derate the engine here, because it turns out that our adjustments are pretty strong, Come in for a nice, gentle landing. Boom. A little bit of a bounce, but not much. Some shock absorption going on over here. And again, we are so light, so it actually would not be hard for our little legs to deal with that. But there we go. All right, well, I'm going to just make sure I don't accidentally hit something incorrectly. I'm going to explicitly shut down the engine, so I don't have to worry about accidentally hit shift for control here. But there we are. We have landed our very first vessel on a foreign body. We have landed a probe on Minmus to prove that we can do it. And what we can do is take a temperature reading over here. We suspect that the moon is pretty cold, but let's verify that. I'm going to log that. Collected and recorded temperature from the environment. We are indeed in the moon's highlands, which makes sense because, again, we're 3.7 kilometers above the quote-unquote sea level of the moon, so quite high over here. And we are going to transmit that data. Going to use a fair bit of power, but no, we're good, especially we've got the solar panels, obviously. push comes to shove, we could turn off the require complete over here, or maybe turn it on. I'm not sure which sense it goes. And then it could send partial data. Then we could recharge our batteries, and then send another load of partial data over here. And there we are. We've completed that contract, getting a whole bunch of Kerbal bucks, and a little bit of bonus science for completing the contract, not to mention the science I just transmitted as well. We got some extra milestones, and we're going to leave this probe here. In fact, I'll go ahead and hibernate it. So if we get another mission to transmit data or science from the surface of the moon, we can just take another temperature reading, see how much it changes over the course of the year. Limited probe control right now because we are on hibernation mode, which I believe the same limited probe control that you get when you don't have a connection to the KSC, which is that you can't steer. WASD has no response. You also can't use shift and control to fine-tune your throttle. Looks like you still do a full burn. So there's, AI in there for like some emergency burns to do some emergency corrections, which is nice to see. In particular, if we have to circularize our satellite when we don't have a connection to the KSC, it's still possible. As long as we have steered ourselves to face the correct way ahead of losing the signal, we will be able to initiate a full burn and then kill that burn even during loss of signal, which represents to me the fact that has been programmed in. In remote tech, you actually do queue up the moves and program them using a flight computer. Here, well, make sure you face the right way while you still have a connection, but then you can at least still execute a burn even if you don't have a direct connection, which is nice to do. But let's go back to the Space Center over here. I'm hoping, cross my fingers, I would love a mission to get science from Minmus. Boom. Well, space around, and surface of Minmus. Fan-freaking-tastic. We can definitely do both over here. Ooh, we've got a mission to adjust the position of one of our satellites, so Sat-1 around the moon. Presumably, assuming it's got enough fuel, we can complete this and get some bonus cash. I'm not going to grab it right now. Okay, but this is a great combo. We still have to explore Kerbin. Oh, which is due to the rendezvous in orbit of Kerbin, which we're going to pair up with the rescue mission at some point. But plant flag on Minmus, science data from space around Minmus, science data from the surface of Minmus. If we forget to do the space around Minmus, that's okay, because we eventually have to go and put a satellite in orbit around Minmus, and that one could do the space science as well. But we are looking to land on Minmus. Before I forget, I'm going to go ahead and warp to the next morning, because it's a lot nicer, I feel, to launch our vessels in the morning. Plus, it's going to be easier for you guys to see. Boom. Excellent. Thank you very much. I feel it actually fast forwards more. I feel like before, the morning was like just at dawn. I actually quite like it a little higher up. I might be imagining things, though. That is entirely possible. Okay, so we are going to land on Minmus. We are going to need a Mark 1 command pod, absolutely. Landing on Minmus is fairly forgiving, so I think we will go with a full science package. That being said, do I want to re-enter with it? No, I'm going to assume that we're going to try to... We're not going to be worried as much about the cost, so I'm not going to re-enter with the science module. So we are going to re-enter with basically just this, and I guess, just that. That being said, I think there's going to be a couple of solar panels on the outside of this, which will actually increase the safety of our personal descent. In addition to that, I could go and put some... Oh, I might be able to unlock some more parts too. I should take a look at that. We want to bring the barometer to confirm that there's no air pressure on Minmus, and it's very expensive, so we're going to bring that back. Hopefully over here, it won't get too much... I could put it up here, just so that it doesn't get... it's a little bit more shielded from the re-entry effect. I'm going to put a thermometer in the back there. Do we have any ladders unlocked? We do. I'm going to put a ladder back here so that when we're on Minmus, it's very easy for us to jetpack up here, but it can sometimes be a bit inconvenient to try to collect the science while jetpacking. So at least here we can grab a ladder, collect the science, and then go. So yeah, this is going to be what comes back to Kerbin and nothing else. So what we're going to do is put a stack decoupler under there. Then we're going to go back and put a Science Junior over there. And obviously we're going to want a goo as well. This could potentially come back. How expensive is this? Only 800. No, you know what? I'm gonna leave it off. It's gonna be a little off center if I do that. I mean, I could put 2 goo canisters. I guess I don't think we've gotten any of these from space around Minmus. It'd be nice to do this a two-person mission, actually. So that we could have a scientist that can reset these experiments. Now, I'm going to focus very simply on getting the science from the surface of Minmus and nothing else. Let me come back to the goo canister, because we got to figure out exactly what we're landing with and whatnot. This is certainly overkill for Minmus, but I don't like to make tall rockets. It's a lot better to get wider rockets, or landing module, rather than tall. Keep the center of gravity below, which is a lot easier, and then you can combine this with more landing struts. I should actually put the engine down, and these Terriers will definitely be overkill for Minmus, but that's going to be okay. Just like the thrust-to-weight ratio is going to be too much. So we got to put these just enough clearance so that as we land, maybe I'll put them a little lower. Higher up is better for center of gravity, but you need to make sure that your engine isn't accidentally going to touch the ground. These are a little too low. Just a scooch. Up, 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 up. Maybe a little higher. It's hard though, because as soon as you click, they sort of move a little. There you go. That looks just about even. So, I think that this is sufficient to, assuming we're already in orbit around Minmus, I believe this is enough delta V to deorbit us, land us on Minmus safely, take off from Minmus, and go home. The gravity is really low on Minmus, so you don't need as much delta V as you do for other things. But I'm not 100% sure that this is sufficient, but I think it is. Solar panel is less of a problem if you've got a manned mission. Worst case scenario, if they're facing the wrong way, you can have one of your Kerbals EVA out and actually just push a little with the jetpack so that your solar panels are facing the right way. Similarly, battery life's not as important if we're not transmitting data. In fact, I don't even know if we need an antenna here, because we have already transmitted all the crew report information based around Minmus. So I think that's going to be good. I think I will go ahead and put some nose cones over here. They're not super heavy. I could go and build some decouplers over here so we can eject them once we're in space, but I think I will go ahead and leave them. Oh, no, and that's good. Just like this. So when we return to Kerbal, we're going to make sure we've collected all the science, and then we're going to eject the bottom part over here. Let me go and put on our goo canister now. So again, it's going to be, a little unbalanced, but that's okay. We don't need a ladder up here because we can jetpack up and down very easily. I don't like it tucked in there. Flips a little bit, but that shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so now we need the rest of our staging. So we need the stack decoupler here, and we are going. So this is basically going to be our trans-Minmusian injection layer or something like that stage. So this presumably will get us from Kerbal to Minmus, possibly helping us circularize around Kerbal as well. Obviously, we want an engine that is very efficient in space. And then we are looking to build our ascent stage at this point, which about 3 of these. We've got a much heavier payload at the top now than we have before. So what we're going to have to do is a wee bit of math here with our swivel engine. So assuming we've got this, probably with some fins. Set like that. Not big fins, but just a little bit. What is our current weight? This should still be burning. Yeah, we'll still be burning above a 1 ratio in our thrust to mass ratio. Will still be above 1, which means this will still push us forward, but not by much. That being said, this doesn't have to take us off by itself anyway, because there's no way that this is going to have enough delta V to boost us into something that we can easily turn into an orbit, because that is a lot more weight than before. So we are going to go with proper asparagus staging, I think, this time, rather than just the one set on the side. We want to go with the whole set? I think we do, actually. So we're going to go with this, and then always try to mount your decoupler as high up as possible, so that when it finishes its job, it goes and pushes this away from the ship, from the top. It makes it a lot better. So we'll have to make sure to put the struts at the bottom. So we're going to start with that. We're going to grab these nose cones here. I think this stage will also use the swivel engines. That's going to be fine. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, move this over here. This stage is not going to use the swivel engines because we're going to have lots of gimbling now for control. But instead it's going to use the Reliance, which are a little bit more powerful and fuel efficient, especially within the atmosphere. Then what we're going to do, these are going to be the outside, the first stage that ends. So the fuel from this stage is going to fuel into this set of boosters, and then this set of boosters is going to fuel into the central tank. So we get some asparagus stage. So this will empty first because all 5 engines will be burning, and they will be burning the fuel primarily from this and this because of the way the fuel flows out. So these 2 tanks on the side will burn through very, very, very quickly. In fact, if we had enough thrust to weight ratio with just the 3 engines, we may not need any more engines over here. In fact, we'd save the weight bringing these. But I don't have good calculations available to myself to be able to determine if that's the case or not. So we're gonna have to go ahead and just kind of overkill it. So I'm gonna get some struts down here for the bottom part. The top part is held by the coupler, but the bottom was not. I'm gonna throw in just a little bit more support over here, and like that. And then we're also more struts. Strut our stuff. Get some of that going on, because when you've got a longer rocket, and especially with decouplers, which are not really the strongest at holding a connection, you can get a lot of wobble, and wobble is death. So we strut up all that for lots of integrity, and then yeah, we'll put a couple of those over there. So we got to fix our staging. In particular, we want all of our engines to light at the same time at the bottom over here. There we go, and like that. So we could do the pre-burn here. Sorry, not that way. Light the engines and then drop these little decouplers over here. And then we've got to make sure that our actual decouplers, so this is the outermost stage. We have to make sure that this is the decoupler that goes first, and it is. And then the secondary ones, which is great. And then we're going to decouple from here and launch that engine. In fact, I'm going to go and combine these together. Be a little dangerous sometimes, especially with some of the more realistic mods, but that's going to be okay. And same thing, we'll go ahead and have those joined up. And then you do that, and you get the parachute. We've got our heat shield and everything like this. So this is going to be the Lander Mark 1. And that should be pretty sufficient. That being said, before I go and complete this, I'm going to go and check to see if we have enough science to unlock anything. And the answer is no. We got a little bit of science from transmitting that the temperature data from Moon, but we need 90 to unlock anything on the next level, so none of that is going to be sufficient. So what we're going to do here is we're going to launch this guy, and who's next on the roster? They both have the same XP. I don't remember who did the last mission. I think Jebediah, which seems to have a lot of XP here, I think he did the crazy flyby of the Moon and Minmus. In particular, yeah, Valentina got her dot of XP from being the first person to orbit Kerbal. So she, yeah, and she's got less XP in the tank here. So she is going to be the first person to land on a foreign body in our solar system here. She's going to land on Minmus and Star of Experience, and then probably we'll go to the Moon with Jebediah and give him some experience points over there. I haven't forgotten anything. I don't have any extra batteries, but that's okay. I don't have a massive amount of solar power. Solar panels are luckily pretty light. I think it's going to be okay if I decide to just throw a couple more over there. That's going to be fine. I mean, they're the same orientation there. If we are face on or back on, we might not be back on. Delicious. I guess I could put one on the back. But it doesn't really matter too much, because again, with a manned mission, I can go and correct that pretty easily. You know what? I'll save the tiny microscopic amount of weight and do something like that. In any case, we should have plenty of power. Ow, don't even really need this, but this gives us a few other hours. Alright, let's lunch this bad boy. So, for the rest of this video, I'm simply going to try to get this guy into orbit. SAS is turned on, throttle is set to full, because we do have the 1 star of experience. We can set things to retrograde and prograde, which is great. I'm going to start the engines, and then I'll immediately stage off these sides over here. And I suspect our thrust weight is going to be way too high, and I'll have to throttle back. And go. Oh yeah, we are launching with gusto over here. In particular, I don't know. Okay, this might require us to reload here. If I go and bring down the thrust limiter here, yeah, it doesn't do both sides the same. 64. Now they're balanced, but we've launched ourselves a little bit more sideways. Okay, so let me just revert to... I guess it'll be easier if I do it in the vehicle assembly. Hold on. Because here, if you adjust the thrust, it automatically balances both sides. So what I want to do on these engines here is drop them to about 50%. because that'll enable me to stay at full throttle, therefore get full effects of gimbling, rather than having to throttle down, which means my gimbling engines don't have full effect. I only want to throttle down the external ones. Let's see how that feels. I think that'll feel a little bit more balanced. Unless I brought them down too low, we'll have to see. All right, full throttle, and go. All right, yeah, still lots of thrust to weight. We're still taking off with a lot of gusto, but now these engines are being used slightly less. And in fact, I'm 100% sure I could have just left them off, and we would still be taking off, and we would have saved some money and some weight. And the weight would have meant getting a little bit more delta V, but we'll leave them on for now, and that's going to be okay. So we'll start our gravity turn here again at about 100 meters per second, or about 1 kilometer. Tends to be the sweet spot, and here what we can do is we can just lock prograde at this point, and we should be 100% fine. It should continue to gravity turn for us. We may still want to look into some fine-tuning, but this is generally the idea. You just tip over about 10 degrees, and I'm going to try to push us back to more equatorial over here, if we can. I haven't turned off the prograde lock. Just fighting it this way, just to try to pull it back. There we go. Much, much better. Because we have a slightly off center of mass because of our equipment. There we go. Because the moon is perfectly equatorial in orbit around Kerbal here, the moon, and so we want to launch ourselves directly facing 90 degrees if we can. So again, I'm going to just try to pull that back a wee bit. And to me it looks like we could push over a little bit more. Gravity turn is being a little slower than I would like, so we want a slightly faster orbit. I think I'm going to go and just put stability assist mode on here instead of the prograde lock, so it fights me a little bit less. And I'm going to try to bring the prograde down. Not too... Oh! Also, I wish I could have staged 100,000 years ago. I lost some of my delta V there. If we end up being short on delta V, that's why. But yeah, we are also way too steep in the descent. I'm actually tempted to decide to redo this one. And I'm going to allow myself to revert during the launch sequences here, you know, to represent, come on, to represent that simulation. But no, I think we're going to be fine. Really want to try to flatten out our orbit as much as possible. We're high enough that the atmosphere is not too bad, so I can go sideways at this point. There we go. It would have been better if I had gravity turned a little bit more, because here makes it slightly less efficient than it could be. But there we go. Apoapsis is good. We got lots of fuel. Oh my god, we're going to have a sick amount of delta V. Okay, we've got tons and tons of fuel. Despite the fact that this ascent was pooped, we are okay. So you can see we're not really pushing up our apoapsis as much, because we're not really burning quite as prograde. Although it's still going up a little bit, but mostly it's flattening this out, which means by the time we get here, our circularization burn will be a lot easier to handle. What's our current altitude? 60,000. And here, I just tend to eyeball about 100K. We don't have to go up quite that high, but it doesn't matter as much since we're going to be, you know, getting a ginormous orbit at some point, although only 1/2 of it, so it's a little bit of a waste, but... Mostly here, you can see I'm really not pushing up my apoapsis that much, so most of my thrust right now is going to helping the circularization, although this will start to move away faster and faster and faster. So at this point, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to cut that, wait till we hit space, which we are there. I'm going to warp to here, and our connection doesn't matter as much. And when we get a little bit closer, that looks pretty good. I'm just going to lock us to prograde for convenience, and go for burn. Oh, there we go. We could have started it potentially sooner. We didn't start it too early, though, because we're actually passing our apoapsis instead of pushing through it. But I think we're going to be okay. Hopefully we didn't start it too late. Oh. No, sure we stage. And actually, we have less thrust weight now, so it's going to be even less good. But we should still easily be able to push our periapsis out from the other side. Oh, version. I've been bumped up to 1.2. That's interesting. Keep putting out these little patches here. Yeah, so it's definitely not ideal. We're pushing up our apoapsis here, but we're past it. If we didn't have enough thrust to weight, we might find ourselves re-entering the atmosphere before we could circularize. But there we go. It's above 70. I'm going to call that good enough. It's not particularly round, but it should be okay. There's the moon, so we're going to have to complete a full orbit of Kerbal before we start our translunar injection phase. But we should be fine. We should have enough fuel in here to get us... Oh, not to the moon, to Minmus. We're going to have to check on that. But in any case, there should be enough fuel in here to send us to Minmus, which is kind of sort of what I'm looking for. In fact, it may even have enough to help us enter into the Minmusian orbit But in any case, I'm still pretty comfortable about our Delta V. Not quite as comfortable as I was at launch here. We definitely could have done that with greater efficiency, but overall, I think we're going to be fine. So we're going to put a cut in here. Next episode, we are going to try to land Valentina Kerman on Minmus. Thanks for watching.